The executioner hesitated, not because he felt mercy, but because killing a queen was never supposed to happen. Mary became queen at 6 days old. Not 6 years. 6 days. She didn't rise to power, she was born into it. She had a claim to England's throne. And England already had a queen. A woman ruling Scotland was dangerous. A woman who could replace England's queen. Unforgivable. They didn't execute her immediately. They waited. 19 years locked away. Because even imprisoned, she was powerful. They accused her of plotting rebellion. The evidence was letters. Letters she never saw. Letters she never approved. She dressed in red, the color of martyrs. The first strike didn't kill her. The second one did. They killed her body to protect their throne. Because a woman with a claim is more dangerous than an army. Her story began not with a choice but with a decree. Her father, King James V of Scotland, died just days after her birth. His last words, a prophecy of doom for his dynasty. The crown passed to an infant. A regency was formed to rule in her name, but a child queen was a pawn. Scotland's powerful neighbour, England, saw an opportunity. King Henry VIII demanded Mary be betrothed to his son, a union that would absorb Scotland into England. The Scots refused. They chose a different path, a different alliance. At 5 years old, Mary was sent away, shipped across the sea to the glittering, sophisticated court of France. In France, she was safe. She was celebrated. Raised alongside the royal children, she was educated to be a queen. She was tall, beautiful, and intelligent. She charmed everyone. At 15, she married the heir to the French throne, the Dauphin Francis. For a brief, shining moment, her future seemed secure. When the French king died, she became Queen of France. She now wore 2 crowns. But fate is a fragile thing. Her young husband was sickly. His reign was short. After just a year, he died. At 18, Mary was a widow, no longer Queen of France, a political inconvenience. She had to go home. The Scotland she returned to was not the one she left. It was a nation transformed by the Protestant Reformation, a land of stark faith and stern lords, suspicious of her French upbringing, her Catholicism, her very essence. She was a foreign queen in her own kingdom. The clash was immediate. She wanted to rule with tolerance, allowing her subjects their new faith while she practiced her own. But to men like the fiery preacher John Knox, a Catholic monarch was an abomination. A woman ruler, a violation of God's law. He preached against her from his pulpit, turning public opinion into a weapon. Governing was a constant battle. She needed an heir, and a husband who could strengthen her position. She chose her cousin, Lord Darnley. He was handsome, aristocratic, and crucially also had a claim to the English throne. Their marriage would double the threat to her rival, Queen Elizabeth of England. It was a political masterstroke, or so it seemed. But Darnley was ambitious, vain, and cruel. He wasn't content to be her consort. He demanded more power. The crown matrimonial, which would make him a co-sovereign and allow him to rule alone if Mary died. She refused. The romance soured. The court became a nest of whispers and conspiracies. Darnley's resentment festered. He grew jealous of Mary's private secretary and close friend, David Rizzio. He convinced the Protestant lords that Rizzio was a papal agent, a secret lover, the true power behind the throne. One night, the conspirators, led by a drunken Darnley, burst into the Queen's private chambers. She was 6 months pregnant. They dragged Rizzio from her side as she begged for his life. He was stabbed. Over 50 times. It was a brutal message. A demonstration of who held the real power. The trauma never left her. Her trust in her husband was shattered. The marriage was over in all but name. 3 months later, she gave birth to a son, James, an heir. The future of her dynasty was secure, but the court remained fractured. Alliances shifted like sand. Darnley, now despised by the Queen and the lords he had conspired with, was isolated. He was a liability, a danger to everyone. He feared for his life, and with good reason. Mary began to rely on a new circle of advisors, chief among them the powerful and decisive Earl of Bothwell. A man of action. A man who promised to solve her problems. Darnley was recovering from illness at a small house called Kirk of Field, just outside Edinburgh. One night, a massive explosion ripped the building apart, but Darnley's body, along with his servants, was found in the garden, unmarked by the blast. They had been strangled. The question was not just who, but why. Suspicion immediately fell on Bothwell, and by extension, on the Queen. Did she know? Did she consent? Or was she a victim of another man's ambition? The truth was lost in the smoke and rubble, but perception became reality. What happened next sealed her fate. Bothwell was put on trial for the murder, a trial widely seen as a sham. He was acquitted. Weeks later, he intercepted the Queen on her way to Edinburgh. He took her to his castle at Dunbar. Was she abducted, or did she go willingly? The debate rages to this day, but what is certain is that just 3 months after her husband's murder, Mary married the man accused of killing him. To the Scottish lords, and to the world, it looked like an admission of guilt. It was the final outrage. The lords rose in rebellion. They raised an army against their queen and her new husband. The two forces met at Carberry Hill. But there was no battle. Mary's troops deserted her. To avoid bloodshed, she surrendered, on the condition that Bothwell be allowed to escape. He fled into exile, never to return. The lords took their queen. They imprisoned her in a castle on an island in the middle of Loch Leven. There, alone and under duress, she was forced to abdicate her throne in favour of her infant son James. But Mary was a queen. She would not remain a prisoner. After nearly a year, she made a daring escape from the island castle. Loyal supporters rallied to her cause. She raised another army, making one last, desperate bid to reclaim her crown. At the Battle of Langside, her forces were decisively defeated. Her options were gone. Her life was in danger. She made a fateful decision. She fled south, across the border into England. She would seek the help and protection of her cousin, her rival, Queen Elizabeth. It was the greatest mistake of her life. Elizabeth did not offer protection. She offered a prison, a comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless. Mary was a Catholic with a strong claim to the English throne. To let her go free was unthinkable. To execute her was equally unthinkable, an anointed queen, killed by another. So Elizabeth did nothing. She kept Mary under house arrest for 19 years. But a captive queen is still a queen. Mary became the focal point for every Catholic plot against Elizabeth. She wrote letters, in secret, in code, smuggled in and out by her supporters. She was a symbol, a living alternative, and that made her more dangerous than ever. Elizabeth's spymaster, Sir Francis Walsingham, was determined to eliminate the threat. He needed proof, irrefutable proof that Mary was plotting to assassinate Elizabeth. He engineered a trap. A new, secret channel of communication was opened for Mary, a channel that Walsingham controlled completely. A young Catholic nobleman, Anthony Babington, wrote to Mary, outlining a plot to kill Elizabeth and place Mary on the throne. Walsingham's agents intercepted the letter. They waited. They needed Mary's reply. She wrote back, in code. She endorsed the plan. It was the death warrant she signed herself. The trial was a formality. Mary was brought before a commission of English lords. She argued that as a sovereign queen of Scotland, she was not subject to an English court. They had no jurisdiction. She was denied legal counsel, denied the right to see the evidence against her, the original letters. She was shown only the decoded copies. She claimed they were forgeries, that words had been added. It didn't matter. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Guilty. Elizabeth hesitated for months. Signing the death warrant of a fellow queen set a terrifying precedent. But her counsel pressured her. The threat was too great. She signed. On the morning of her execution, she was calm, composed. She walked to the scaffold in the great hall of Fotheringhay Castle. She wore a dress of black, the colour of mourning, but underneath she wore a gown of deep crimson, the liturgical colour of Catholic martyrdom. It was her final, silent statement. She forgave her executioners. She prayed for her soul, for her son, and for the Catholic Church. She knelt, placed her head on the block, and said, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." The first blow from the axe missed her neck, striking the back of her head. The second severed it. Almost. A third was needed to finish the task. In killing Mary, Elizabeth had hoped to secure her throne. But history has a sense of irony. When Elizabeth died childless 19 years later, the man who inherited her crown was none other than Mary's son, James. He became King James V of England, uniting the two thrones his mother had fought for. He had his mother's body exhumed and reburied in Westminster Abbey, the final resting place of English monarchs. Her story became a legend, a romantic tragedy, a cautionary tale. Was she a naive victim, tossed about by the schemes of powerful men? Or a cunning politician who made disastrous choices? The record is a blur of propaganda, passion, and politics. In the end, her guilt or innocence was beside the point. Her crime was not treason. Her crime was her existence. She was a woman with a claim. In a world ruled by men, that was a fundamental threat to the established order. She was a disruption to the system, and the system, to protect itself, had to remove her. They could imprison her body, they could take her life, but they could not erase her claim. A claim that, through her son, would ultimately triumph. A reminder that power, once born into, can never truly be destroyed, only inherited.